Hey everybody, this is B-Word of the Bleach Bros Podcast. Before we get into today's episode, I want to bring your attention to our Linktree. Please visit Linktree/Bleach Bros Podcast for the links to all of our socials, streaming sites, and merch. Linktree is linktr.ee/Bleach Bros Podcast, all one word. If you enjoy our content, make sure to give us a like and give us a review on whatever platform you're listening to us on. Also, invite your friends. And with that, let's get started with the show.
I am Tyler Havlin. I am the big, the bald, the beautiful, the brash, and the oftentimes bastardly host of the Inner Idiot podcast. And you are currently listening to While I Masturbate, the Bleach Bros Podcast.
Welcome into the Bleach Brothers Podcast. This is B-Word, and as usual, I am here with my good buddy, Jake, because he wasn't a good buddy last week.
I'm always a good buddy.
You are always a good buddy.
Fault. You didn't introduce it that way, so that was your fault.
It was my fault.
Yeah, so.
I know we're recording this prior to Christmas, and this is not a Christmas episode, but are you ready for Christmas, bro?
Yeah, family flew into town today. It reminded me of an awkward moment with my sister. I was taking a pee today, and I forgot to lock the door. This is now, and, people always barge in and stuff because it's not their house. They don't look for the light on the door. It reminded me in high school when, I went into the bathroom with a magazine, started going to town, and my sister walked in, and I walked out, right? And then I walked into her room because I think I was, in junior high. She was in high school. I was in 8th grade. She was in high school. And I walk in, I said, hey, I just want to apologize. I was in the bathroom and, sitting down doing that. And she goes, Jake, everybody poops.
Love it.
And I just went, never mind. But it excites me because tonight we have another good bro on. And this is somebody who has been in a room where we've all been naked together. It is great to welcome back Mitch, one of the original Bleach Bros. So we've all seen each other's balls. Who's got the best balls, guys?
I'll defer on that one.
Well, I like Jake's. They're right up there. Top 5 balls I've seen in my whole life.
See, I pancake nuts. I agree with you. I have to go with B-Words though, because B-Words, apparently his grandpa, he's just got some hangers.
Yeah, just skin anchors, bro. Skin anchors. That's how we work this. We don't swim, we float. So that's kind of the thing. So Mitch, we're bringing you on this week to kind of do a recap. There's been a lot of really good properties in Nerdom this year. And there's been a shit ton of changes, specifically with DC. James Gunn is now in charge of DC with one other person. I don't remember his name. Forgive me for that. The Guardians of the Galaxy movie hasn't even come out yet. And we're hearing all of this shit about DC now. Can you kind of just set the board for us? Let us know kind of what's going on. And then talk about what's your excitement level with DC right now?
Sure. I mean, from my understanding, we've gone into this era where we're going to reboot the DC universe again. James Gunn is coming in. He's the Kevin Feige of it now.
Right.
I have a positive outlook with what he's going to do. And I think there's a lot of negative criticism right off the bat and all these calls for boycotts and things like that because he's not doing what everyone wants him to do. I don't think doing what everyone wants him to do would be the right thing right now. So he's really clearing the board and making way for some new visions and some new ideas and new storytelling. And I'm excited for that. I'm ready to see what that looks like.
See, I agree with you on one side and I disagree with you on the other in the sense of I don't agree with the people when you're saying they shouldn't be mad at him because, he's trying to change up some things and do some things differently because let's be honest. Did really people support the DCEU? We've all mainly, I think, have a consensus that there are great characters. There's some greatness that could be found in there, but it wasn't profoundly overwhelmingly awesome.
No.
The problem I have though is that I feel like it's the Joss Whedon syndrome, right? When Zack Snyder left Justice League and then we had Joss come in, it's oh, it's fine because Joss has done an amazing job. I have that fear that's going to happen with James Gunn. Like, we've seen his success at Marvel. Like, of course, it'll just translate, and that doesn't always work. Not that I'm not a fan of James Gunn. I think it can happen. I just hope he puts the right people in place and he's not a meddler, if that makes sense.
Right. That's my take on it, really, is that it's not just the Joss Whedon thing. It's the Schumacher thing. It's the same pattern you see when they take a property that's doing well and then they try to commercialize it. Mm-hmm. They try to put it in a toy aisle, in a Happy Meal, and then it falls apart. And I think DC has to start understanding that the fan base that they need, that they should be going after, is us. It's dudes in their mid to late 30s and early 40s wanting our characters on the screen. We don't really care what's in our McDonald's Happy Meal toy. We don't care about the commercialization of it. But I think that's one of the problems that happened even when Batman versus Superman was too dark. We can't have that. We can't have that warehouse scene with Batman in there. Well, yes, you can, but that doesn't sell McDonald's Happy Meal toys. So as soon as that studio starts getting involved, and I think James Gunn is going to have a lot more creative power and more influence and being able to hold back the studio and let them run their game. So
I see James Gunn to DC as Elon Musk to Twitter. It's a lose-lose scenario is what I see. Mm-hmm. I think the fan base is either going to have too high of expectations or they're going to have the wrong expectations. And either way, I feel like they're going to be disappointed. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to come out with disappointing content. I think that Batman in and of himself is interesting. I think that Superman in and of himself is interesting. I think that Wonder Woman in and of herself is interesting. What I fear is that they're going to reboot this as it should be. Like, I want to be clear, it should be rebooted, but that they're going to try to live off of Marvel's coattails again and try to tell a story that mimics the story arcs of Marvel. And I would much rather see them try to put out their own content while also trying to reboot, if that makes sense. What do you guys think about that?
I have the same fears that you do, but this is what I've never understood with it, and I don't think it's DC. I think it's Warner Bros. Right, as with its intellectual properties. The DC universe, the layout for it's an open book test. You've already seen what Marvel did with all of its intellectual properties. You see what Disney is doing with Star Wars. And what they're doing with Star Wars is letting all of these creators be creative and get these immersive worlds going, right? WB did it by itself with the Wizarding World. The Harry Potter franchise is extremely successful.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
DC in itself is successful when you look at its animated runs. When you look at its cartoon shows. I mean, it has success. Just let the people who are creating these things create and let them run with it and let them be successful.
But you brought up a good point, Mitch, not to interrupt you, but the fact that you said the DC universe has a great animated catalog. And I agree, because I love the animated universe of DC. But to me, I've always said, the DC has a problem with their heroes and villains in the sense that they're too powerful. I feel that they translate better to cartoon. It's that's why Batman's one of the greatest heroes of all time. We know that, but it's also an easier film to make than some of the other characters that they have. I think we're in the time frame now where, graphics, everything is caught up that we can do it. But it's almost like when you see live action Disney cartoons go to, Disney cartoons go to live action, that it doesn't translate the same, because you can't have the same cartoony faces or you can't, make a character do so many crazy things out of their body without it looking so fake. I think that's one thing, but that they do right with the animated universe. The problem is, though, too, is that they take almost the comic and translate it. And I feel with movies, they want to keep it to the storyline, but they also want to have so many damn creative liberties and create something new that it never works out.
And that's exactly it, right? If you look at one of my favorite DC books is New Frontiers. It's by the art is by Darwin Cook. New Frontier was translated to animation, and it was panel for panel. The artwork was there, the voice casting was there, but that's because it's from illustration to animation. That's why it works so well. You can do that panel to panel. If you took that same storyline and translated it to a 2-hour-long live-action movie, you would trip over yourself a lot because there's so much going on in there. So I think the movie universe needs to adopt a lot of what the MCU did in let's get comic inspired and not comic accurate with our real life stuff. Keep the comic accurate stuff where you can take your pictures from illustration and put them to animation and then put a voice behind that.
Can I ask you this? Because I always felt like I was more of a Marvel fanboy, and that was even when we would talk back in the day about comics and everything too, not just, everything that we have now. And tell me if I'm wrong, you're more of a DC guy. Do you feel the DC universe of fans would be as accepting as Marvel fans are, in my opinion, of a change of story? Like you're saying, keep it comic based, but not totally accurate. I don't think DC fans have the same mindset. I mean, you're different. I think that you feel it. And I think you've seen the success that the MCU has and you want the DC to have that. But I almost feel sometimes that DC fans are more like hard headed, if that makes sense. Like
they are for sure.
They don't want to see a change. It has to be Martha and it has to be this and it has to have that storyline. And we have to have a Batman parents dying scene every damn movie. I mean, that's the problem, I think, too, is the fandom itself is they won't think outside the box.
Exactly. So I see those problems with DC fans a lot. If you're going to tell a Batman story, there has to be that death scene in it. It has to be done in every one of those movies. It was done in Tim Burton's Batman. It was done in Batman Begins. It was hinted at in BVS. It's not necessary. If you're a Batman fan, you know why he's there. It's plain and simple. I think one of the major differences in DC and Marvel fans is this. Marvel fans are fans of like everything Marvel. Like they can find ways to connect with all kinds of characters within that universe. And then that now translates over to Disney and Star Wars, and it's all this mixed bag, right? And everybody finds all this stuff. When you get into DC talk, you have Batman fans or Superman fans, or you have a Flash fan. There's not a lot of connected, and whoever your thing is or your guy, he's better than everyone else, and here's why. Like there's no shared like love for the entire universe of DC. People will sit down and say Man of Steel is the best thing ever. And then 4 or 5 movies later in this DCEU thing came along the Suicide Squad. And they're like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, but it's all connected to what you started this with. And you don't appreciate it. DC fans are just that way.
So I want to kind of transition away from this, but I want to get your guys' take on this. If you're an advisor to James Gunn, what is your recommendation to move forward? Are you looking at more trying to do isolated projects that will eventually connect, or are you trying to do a lot of cameos? Like what is your preference here? And I'll start with Mitch.
So if I'm James Gunn, I would say the DC universe, and he's come out and said, I think even just today, that what's going to inspire his run is the Justice League Unlimited cartoons and the Young Justice series cartoons. That's great. That's really great source material that pulls from creative minds. I would say you need to figure out kind of like what your timeline is. What are we going to do in the next 10 years? And then which creative people are you going to give those projects to? And then let them create together, right? Some of my geek out this year, I've become hyper-focused on Star Wars. And a lot of the Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, all this, these are like one story. One season is 6 or 7 or 9 episodes. It's the same story told by 9 different creative directors and writers who are all on the same page. They all want to get to 9. And some of them are doing 5 plus 4 and 6 plus 3 and 8 plus 1. And they're all getting that result in their episodes. And they're creating this overall great thing. I think the DC needs to see that too. Let the creators create this product and let us see what it looks like.
Well, Mitch, that's also direction though, and that's what James Gunn can bring. If it was me, it'd be a 3-tier plan, or three things that I would really focus in on. 1, don't be afraid of failure. And what I mean by that is I think people forget that, and I've brought this up multiple times, that Marvel has had some fuck ups. Marvel has had some shitty films. But sometimes we can look back and rewatch it and go, I knew what they were doing there. But there's some garbage films in there and they keep going. So don't be afraid of failure. Just realize that you can keep continuing the world building and just say, we had a trip. but at least the characters there, and at least we had this, and pull the good points out of that.
Mm-hmm.
To stop trying to play catch up. And put a timeline in there and try to get some things done, accomplished there, but don't say, okay, they screwed up saying, okay, we have 2 films out. Let's make a Justice League film to catch up to Marvel.
Right.
But also don't say, okay, we've introduced every character with a solo film. Now we need to do a team up. Just build the worlds you have based on the people. Because I agree with Mitch in the sense that DC characters, I hate Superman. I love Batman. The Flash is boring to me. Green Lantern's cool. Mitch has really turned me around about that because I think it's okay to say, Mitch, you're the biggest Green Lantern fan I probably ever met.
Right.
And I think that's your favorite character out there. And I love Wonder Woman. You know what I mean? But like, if you look at it, I don't feel that way a lot about Marvel characters. And so I totally agree with that. The third part, though, is to get out of their own way. And what I mean is get out of their way with toys, like you were saying earlier, or coloration, or just write a damn good story and film it. And you can put some stuff on the cutting room floor, but just make the story. Stop like focusing in on because I feel like when they edit, they're like, okay, what will sell a commercial? Okay, get that team in here. Okay, what's going to sell a toy now? Get the team in here. Just make a damn good movie and it'll work out. Spider-Man did it perfectly where we didn't finally have an Uncle Ben scene. We finally got it in that trilogy with Aunt May to a point. But I think we were all like breathing a sigh of relief when we found out Uncle Ben was dead. We didn't have to watch it. We walked out going, finally, we get Spider-Man. We all know where it comes from. And the cool part is those are big enough characters where everybody essentially knows, or somebody can at least tell them who Uncle Ben was. And it's an easy to understand thing. So the final point is stay true to the source material. Don't use it as a Bible, but use it enough to get the point across and get there.
I guess as a fanboy, I just kind of want to add in my 2 cents here before we transition to the next topic. As a fanboy of all things nerddom, I'm very disappointed in the way that DC has handled their current properties, in a sense that I feel like you have some really, really perfect castings, or at least perfect casting potentials with the characters. In that, you also have some terrible castings. I mean, Jason Momoa is not Aquaman to me, but Henry Cavill is either the best Superman or one of the best Supermen. Ben Affleck, to me, Jake, we've talked about this before, is the best Batman to me. It's the most comic accurate Batman to me. And Gal Gadot, however you pronounce it, arguably the best Wonder Woman. And I guess as a fan, I'm just disappointed in that, because I feel like not only are their castings wasted, but now we're actually finding out that these characters who thought they were returning are not returning. And so I'm excited to kind of see where DC goes. I'm happy that we're able to discuss that. We'll have to break that down as we get more announcements come January and at a later point. But what I really want to transition into here with you guys is I want to talk about Marvel Phase 4. This episode is really going to try to break down the current state of Marvel, the MCU, where it was, where it's at, where it's going, and kind of try to figure out and nerd out with some theories and such. So I think we can talk about the Infinity Saga from start to finish. So Marvel's Phase 1, 2, and 3. I think we can talk about 3 if they were not to create any additional content in 3. Or after 3. That would have been arguably the perfect saga of cinema. Would you guys agree with that, just from start to finish?
Yeah.
And going into Phase 4, so a couple things with Phase 4 that are notable. Number one, we introduced legit television shows, right? We've had television shows before. We're now finding out that they're connected in a roundabout way. But Disney Plus took over the game, started introducing WandaVision and Loki and Hawkeye and etc., right? And so now we have new properties in that mode. We also have additional content as far as films. In Marvel Phase 4, there are over 50 hours worth of content. Tell me, how does Phase 4 rank to you against the first 3? And Jake, I'll start with you.
Against the first 3, it'd be Phase 3, Phase 2, Phase 4, Phase 1. And the reason is I think they're some of the best gems in Phase 1, but I also think that's the most screw-ups and boring stories being told, because I think they were trying to find their stride and get there. And I think they also went, here's our finish line. We just have to make it there. And you could tell with that journey. I think now they hit the finish line. They hit a home run, or however you want to put it. And now they're just like, how do we continue this ship? Because I announced that after it was done, it was like our Star Wars, and trying to have a whole new saga. And am I going to be interested? And I have not really been that interested. There are parts of the story I like, but I feel like all I'm looking for is cameos, who's coming next, and how can you surprise me?
And who's banging She-Hulk.
And yeah, and it just not a lot has happened. I've been more excited for the TV shows than the movies. I feel like so much stuff has been forced, and the stuff I want to see is so far out on the slate, or by the time it comes out, I'm just sort of like, okay, well, it's fillers. It's all fillers, no killers, essentially, right? Like, you're just making a movie to have a sequel, or you're making a movie to finally appease Scarlett Johansson, or you're making a movie to honor a guy, that you could have just recasted. No offense, recast Chadwick Boseman. Loved him as Black Panther, but I don't see the point of that. That's what it feels like to me with a lot of these new films and these new properties is they're trying to figure out how to top the next part rather than where's the next finish line or the next relay race. And it starts to feel like a cash grab, which bothers me.
Mitch, what about you?
I agree with Jake on a lot of that. We've connected things or started things back in 3 and 4, and now we're just trying to figure out how to make it all go there. I think to his point, you've got these big announcements at D23 and these other things where they're packing these exhibition halls with all these fans and saying, okay, here's what you get for the next 10 years. Now leave us alone while we try and make it for you. Like, we're just trying to make you happy so you'll keep looking at our stuff. I don't think you should announce every project like that in a run all the way down, because again, it surprises us. I feel like, it's almost like Men in Black 2 and Men in Black 3. We saw the first one, it was all surprises, and we didn't see any of those turns coming. But after the second one, we kind of figured where you were going. So it's like that. If I'm ranking them, Phase 2, then 3, and then 1. Because I loved all of the second phase stuff. Age of Ultron, I think, stands as probably the best Avengers movie, because there were real problems there with them fighting each other and that kind of stuff. 3, of course, everything up with Thanos. It was the culmination of everything. And then just going back to Phase 1 and watching those first solo movies and things like that really started to tie it together and bring you in. But we have to slow down with how much we're seeing. Like, let me know what's coming out this year, and then let me know what's coming out the year after that, the next year.
Well, there used to be a thing too. I remember when we nerd out and have arguments of how are we going to introduce the magic universe to this, or how are we going to introduce space? And now that we've done that, it's like, okay, what else? Now it's like, how are we going to introduce mutants? And I feel like that flopped. And how are we going to introduce these new characters? And that's been flopping. And the characters we've been wanting have been promised and everything forever have not happened. And you watch movies like, I always go back to Thor: Love and Thunder when they threw Mjolnir out the window so he couldn't get it. I was thinking, thank God that hammer's not coming back. It's going to end up on some planet. The end credit scene is going to be Beta Ray Bill, pick it up, and that's all I needed. And his face could have been mostly dark. You could have made that work, and then he gets it back, and I'm like, okay, well, there goes that fucking idea. That sucks. Gore, and then Gore turns out to be a big old puss, and I'm just like, what happened to this movie? Like, you had a chance, and it's not that we are always right, but for a while there, they were really taking to heart our opinions and our thoughts and our ideas. Because, you look at it, Mitch and Brian, back in the day, it used to be they would announce that huge slate and it would change all the time. And they would realize that's not going to happen, or this isn't the time, or that's not going to make sense. And now it's like, who cares? We're still putting it out. We don't care if the graphics don't look great. We don't care if the story doesn't really connect. And that's a problem. B-word, you?
That's exactly where I was going to go with this. We've got 50 hours and 21 minutes worth of content in Phase 4. That is more than all 3 phases combined. What we have seen is lazy writing. We have seen lack of character, backstory, or introduction, however you want to go with that. But more importantly, there's been a huge issue with the graphics and the digital arts in this. And you talk about the Marvel graphic artists being overworked, and they're boycotting, and they're complaining, and they're this and they're that, and that's been leaking out of Disney and Marvel, which has been a safe, more or less, of information up until recently. And you're talking about that trying to compete with other types of properties like the Star Wars, like the DC, like, the whatevers are coming out. And I just feel like as we're talking about this phase 4 in particular, I think that they've introduced some great characters, but I think that they've done a very shoddy job of trying to slap it all together. And I guess that's probably going to take us into our next conversation. So why don't we just take a break right here, and we'll be right back.
What's up, guys? My name is Gunner, and my mom and dad have this really cool podcast. I think you should check it out. It's called Happy Hour Podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, listen to us on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and Stitcher.
Bleach Bros Podcast is proud to align itself with Jerky Pro, a beef jerky manufacturer established by military and paramilitary veterans.
Available in 3-ounce or 1-pound bags with great flavors such as honey glazed, teriyaki, red hot, apple cinnamon, original, peppered, sweet barbecue, and if you're ballsy enough, nuclear.
Be sure to use our promo code to get some of the best jerky on the market. Use Bleach Bros 5, all lowercase, to take advantage of this offer today. Welcome back. Thanks for listening to our ads. We truly appreciate it. I know that ads aren't fun, but in listening to those, you certainly are helping us put out content. Even if it's just a couple pennies in our pocket, we do reinvest into this thing. So unless you want to hear my voice consistently and you never want to hear Jake again, just listen to those ads. So guys, I know that we took a break right there, and the reason why we took the break right there is because I know that we're all passionate about where the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going next.
It's because you James Gunned it. You wanted to relaunch this show, and because you realized the first part of this show was just not where you wanted it to be. So I get it.
It was absolutely where I wanted it to be, but I feel like the meat of our conversation is actually going to start here. So we're going into Phase 5. So Phase 5 is going to start with Ant-Man Quantumania. Mitch, talk with me a little bit about Phase 5. We're looking at, it goes from Ant-Man and it ends with Daredevil and Thunderbolts. What are your expectations for this next phase of the MCU?
I think a lot of big payoffs, probably. I've seen maybe not a lot, but I've seen some significant drawback where they're talking about scaling it back and reshooting and redoing some of the stuff that they've been doing because they're not happy with the product that they're ready to put out. And they know that basically after reviewing Phase 4, they want to change some of that stuff that they're putting out. I think that Quantumania, and I've read some reviews, some early reviews. I've seen some of the interview type things. I think one of the best things that Ant-Man is going to do here is they went in with the director. They went very boldly in and said, we don't want this to be another like filler type movie. We don't want this to be something that's very, just here's another character with a little thing that will eventually be part of a bigger thing. We want this to be the jump off point. We want an Avengers level threat, something that happens and it will set the tone for the entire next phase. And that's what they did. And I think Ant-Man in general gets kind of pushed to the side a little bit because he's not everybody's favorite and he's not the coolest hero and stuff. But there's a lot of storytelling there and there's a lot of character development there and there's a lot of cool things I think you can do with those characters. So I'm actually really excited to see how they jump off with Phase 5 with Ant-Man, Quantumania. Bring Kang out right at the beginning and then go. And then the rest of it's just a lot of connecting those dots where we haven't seen Loki in a long time. There's a lot of speculation about what's going to happen in Guardians. And then some of these other characters that we've been building for a while, now getting a chance to see what their next adventure is in that.
Jake, what about you?
I'm worried. Oh, I'm super worried. And the reason is this. I think Ant-Man, like Mitch said, is one of the greatest characters that gets pushed to the side. And I feel like they're going to do the crutch on Paul Rudd of humor and then the other characters sort of leading it. But also I think they're going to try to pay off way too much in that one film alone and make it like, okay, we have the Quantum Verse. We have this. We have Kang. Let's make this almost like an Avengers level. Because we've talked about that. All these films, now that we've had that, like how do you top the next thing, and you need to stop topping solo or trying to make solo films top an Avengers film. Like, let it build and let it happen and recreate the cake or pizza or whatever you want to call it. So I think they're going to try to pay off too much. They're going to try to pay off phase 4 with that one movie. That's my opinion there too. I'm scared because I feel like, again, we're getting interrupted, and I mean this, interrupted with TV shows to take over almost the whole slate. I love the TV shows, and I agree with you, B-Word, when you said, finally we have some real ones and stuff, and they're connected. But there was something that was nice about knowing that Daredevil and the Punisher and Luke Cage and all them connected to this, but we're still like their own little entity world, if and not like, because I think it was that mystique and like, oh man, I wish they would join. I wish I could see Daredevil in the scene, at the end of Avengers Endgame, but it didn't happen. And now that they're so intertwined, it's like, okay, do we make this a movie level? How many characters do we introduce to this? Do we tell it in, 6 episodes and have 3 crappy ones? Do we tell it in 12 episodes? Stuff like that. The other thing is, I thought it was going to end with Blade. Was I wrong? Because I thought Blade was coming out very last, like in September. And that was because it was Thunderbolts, Captain World, New World Order, and then Blade, but I could be mistaken.
So you've got Thunderbolts, which is supposed to be a film, and you also have Blade. But my understanding is, and this is just a recent rumor, is that Blade is going to be pushed into Phase 6, just because Marvel has realized the weight that they've put on their digital artists and trying to put out so much on the slate. Marvel is in the midst of doing a reschedule already. You've seen that with some properties that have been pushed out from the announcement date to the actual cinema date. And so right now we've got Phase 5, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. By the way, Rocket Raccoon's going to die. The Marvels, Captain America, New World Order, Thunderbolts, Blade, of course, is supposed to be in this phase. But from a television series perspective, we have What If Season 2, Secret Invasion, Loki Season 2, Ironheart, Echo, Agatha Coven of Chaos. Oh my God, if I miss that one, that's going to make me cry. And then Daredevil Born Again. So we still have a full slate. And I feel like from the number of properties, you have an equal amount of properties between film and television. But going back into the issue that I had with Phase 4, I still feel like you're putting a lot on the storytellers to try to get content out within this phase. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this phase is going to last 2 years. Mm-hmm. It's going to be all of 23 and all of 24. Am I correct on that?
24, yeah. Because, and like you said, there's been some changes, but Blade originally was supposed to come out September, October 24. Even then, that puts Thunderbolts at anywhere from June to August, and if there's no other pushbacks, right, of when it's going to come out within that timeline, which is still almost the full year. Yeah, no, I agree. The storytelling, I mean, I have a fear with storytelling, but I also feel like you have this long, and you've also had this long if Kevin Feige's been doing what he's always done, is when they wrote the first Iron Man, they had a direction they were going with ideas and like a lot of story already being written. I'm not as worried about that as the visual effects artist, but I'm also more worried that they don't operate like Mitch was saying, like Mandalorian and Star Wars. And I'm not saying Star Wars is getting it right, but the fact that they're not all on the same page to get to 9. Mm-hmm. I feel like some of these guys coming in that they're bringing are in it for themselves in the sense of, I'm just going to make my own movie. I felt that when I saw The Eternals.
Yes.
I don't hate it as much as other people, but it really felt to me like a big fuck you. I'm doing what I want. And it will connect, but it's going to connect how I want it to. And then you can make it work around me. And I feel a lot of the directors and writers coming in have been doing that more so, and I'm not liking it. I'm not saying you need to stick to the same boring formulaic writing and make sure every little bow is tied and every character is introduced and stuff, but at least give me to the end game. And that's a pun intended with Avengers Endgame, but you get what I mean? Like that's, I think, the people's problem with Phase 4. And I think that's the worry for Phase 5 is, are all these creative people going to come in and just do their own little fucking movie?
Are we being spoiled, though? Are we sitting here sucking on this silver spoon? Because I remember that when we were in 2010, 2011, Mitch, I remember having these conversations with you in person where we're talking about the next phases and how you're going to get other characters, and holy shit, they tease Thanos. And like, we're going through this world where we're going, okay, Daredevil's an excellent fucking show. when are we going to see this? And they always talk about the event, right? And now we're actually starting to get some of these crossovers into the actual MCU for multiple reasons. And now we're not happy with how it's being done. Like Mitch, this question's for you to start off with. Are we too spoiled? Like, are we sitting here like looking at the silver spoon and complaining it's not gold?
Absolutely, we are, and I think that's part of the problem with the entire overall fan base. For those of us who are older and have been here through the '99 Blade and the 2000 X-Men's and all of these other creative properties, the amount of pop culture content that's coming out from everywhere, every single year on streaming platforms and movies and everything else was unheard of when we were kids. People say this to me too. They go, I don't like the way that episode did this, or I don't like what they did with that character. And I go, well, then go work for Disney, man. Like, go become a writer, like, and then be part of that next generation that tells these stories again. I think you have to really be careful with what you're putting out and how much you're putting out, just in general, at the jump. Because again, here we come with this, like, we asked for the Netflix Daredevil. We wanted Charlie Cox to be Daredevil in the MCU. We wanted him back. Yep. And then they showed us him in the yellow suit in the preview for She-Hulk, and I lost my mind because that's Daredevil, man. And then he showed up and did what he did, and everybody was like, no.
I hated it.
No way. That's we don't like to turn it back off. We don't like that.
That's right.
But
Get it out of here.
You can't just do that. You have to be like, okay, well then we asked for that and that's what they gave us. But is that do you really think that's going to be the tone of his own show and like where he comes later on? I think that's just one episode of a show that he cameoed in. I also think it's just because I look at it like the books are written. Like, if Daredevil shows up in this this issue of this comic, that's not the definitive version of Daredevil in that 3 or 4 panels. He's got his own run over here. So let's see what that looks like. But we get so angry right off the jump. It's dangerous to do that.
Yes, we get angry because no, you're wrong, Mitch. We don't just have the silver spoon in our mouths. Give us a fucking platinum one. You'd be feeding us good stuff forever, and now we give us Ralph Boner on a spoon. Suck my dick. Okay. What I mean by this is, okay, so you're saying that you are okay with Daredevil because when he has his own show, he can have a different tone. The problem is with that is it is different in a comic book when you can go and read that run and realize he has his own series. This is a connected universe that's more visual based, that we are trying to get everybody on the same page. And this is the exact point I was making in my last one, that you have writers that are going to write Daredevil one way, and then when he gets to his own show, we're going to be like, well, what Daredevil do we have now? Do we have Daredevil 3.0? Whoa. Do we have the Daredevil from Netflix? And it's not going to be as cohesive and connective. I told B-Word as soon as it came out, because he called me and he was like, you're going to, and I fucking went off. I was not a fan because I felt it was not Charlie Cox. It was not what I asked for. And what I mean by that, and I know I can go work for Disney or whatever, right? But we asked for the Netflix Charlie Cox to come in. What you did is you just cast the guy and then wrote whatever the fuck you wrote, and he banged a big green snoo angry woman. And you're telling me that's the fucking same character? Get the hell out of here. That is horse shit. So no, we do not have a silver spoon. No, you need to stop giving us things, because all they've been doing is not connecting properly. And then they've been introducing people just to give us a big middle finger. I'm afraid of to Wolverine to come into Deadpool, because I don't think it's going to go well.
Oh, I
honestly think it's going to be another Ralph Boner moment, and I could be wrong. But tell me this, B-Word, we have been excited for so many characters to get introduced, and the last few times they've been doing that to really connect all these worlds, because they own all the properties now, a lot of it feels like a big old middle finger, like screw you. Oh well, move on.
So twofold here. Daredevil, I see kind of what was happening with that. I think that there was a tone to She-Hulk. I'm not mad at Daredevil for smashing She-Hulk. I'm just going to put that out there right now.
No, not either, but
I would smash She-Hulk, and
she would.
Someone had to do it.
Yeah,
why not the blind
straight guy? Up, dude. I would much rather have it be Daredevil than somebody else. So there's that. I like She-Hulk. I did. When it got to the end, it got too comic panel-y. specifically in the last episode, right? I liked Miss Marvel, but the tone was very much like a free-form television show to me, right? I feel like Disney is doing things purposefully to introduce characters to specific segments of society and then wrap those through the characters that we know and we love, right? And so it's kind of the same thing in Avengers Endgame when you had all the women that were there, the make a sandwich scene. And you're like, okay, this can be a super sandwich, right? And it wasn't a super sandwich. Like Tony Stark died. They didn't actually do anything. They just left the knife on the counter. You know what I mean? So I feel like there's going to be a couple areas within the storytelling that are going to have that. But I do think that Marvel has proven themselves to be able to take rubbish and turn it into at least Easter eggs. I mean, look at Thor: The Dark World. Thor: The Dark World has so much more meaning now than it did then. And arguably, it's the worst Marvel movie ever, right? So we can at least appreciate some of this rubbish. I do think that Kevin Feige has control still, and I do think that he has a vision still. What I do think that has happened is that he's taking more advice from people around him and trying to implement it to continue the story, not just for the next 5 years, but potentially the next 20 years. Now, granted, I don't know that it'll be around in 20 years. I kind of hope it's not, because we get into the whole purpose of like having to recast, and, you have existing characters come back and they're it's just, it's crazy. Right. But the beautiful part about comic books is that the characters always come back and the characters are always who they are. I do not discount that Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds are not going to have a fun movie. Ryan Reynolds is in control of that movie, and Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. Like I know the guy's played so many other characters.
Yeah.
He is Wolverine. And so in those two, I particularly trust them. The ones that I don't are the ones that I'm not just too, I don't know how they're looking at it. What do you do with Scarlet Witch at this point? Where's Vision? Like, he's white. Like, did he get a job? Like, what's going on with Vision? Like, you're also looking at, where's Blade going to be in this? Where's the Ebony Blade going to be in this? You've got so many of these storylines that I want to see all these different segments of storytelling. I want the magical. I want the fantastical. I want the dark. I want everything, but I still want the crossover.
But guys, do you feel another problem they might be having is that they're introducing characters that nobody gives a shit about? And I sort of mean, like, I give a shit about Blue Beetle in the DC, and I'm not trying to do a crossover of another universe, but a lot of people don't. And I feel a lot of the characters they've been releasing have been to force a segment of a population crowd to join into the billions of us that follow these, instead of actually getting characters that actually work together. And I'm not saying every character they introduce haven't. Like you said, you're not excited for Agatha. I'm not excited for Ironheart. I just think that's going to be a crappy filler TV show altogether. I'm just not a fan of that.
Let me put you on the spot. Did you watch Black Panther?
Yes.
And you're still not excited for Ironheart?
Nope.
Really?
Yeah, I'd rather watch Agatha. Like I said, I'm more excited for that show because it also feels like a special presentation where it's a whole nother segment that it feels like it needs to be connected, but it's also going to happen in its own timeline where I'm like, okay, I'm cool with that. I want that. I don't need everything to be in this exact timeline. Sometimes you can go back. That was, I think, the joy of Scarlet Witch or Black Widow. I mean, not Scarlet Witch, Black Widow, because I enjoyed that it was outside the timeline because of how they did the film, that it didn't need to be a continuation or like right before Endgame or anything. It was like, okay, here's where we're going to put it. And I was cool with that. I don't hate on that film as much as other people. But Mitch, do you feel that they've been introducing the wrong characters?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. I didn't need Werewolf by Night. I don't need a lot of this other stuff. But again, I think the introduction of Moon Knight has more meaning than what we know right now. I think the Loki series has more meaning than what we know right now, and that's where I get a little more excited than other people because I'm very aware of where I think Scarlet Witch is going and her character development since her introduction in Civil War. No, not Civil War.
Age of Ultron.
Yeah, AOU. No, before that.
Well, she was in the end credit scene
Winter Soldier,
before
right?
Age of Ultron. Yeah,
her character development has come a long way, and she's very much not done. I believe she'll come back to the MCU when Doctor Doom comes into the MCU, and I believe that that's where the White Vision is right now too. Moon Knight introduced Latveria. It introduced another part of that supernatural Doctor Strange realm, and it opened doors just enough to say, hey, we can go this way with our characters. Looking at it in that way, do we really need a lot of these characters? Probably not. And are we introducing them too quickly? Did we need Blade at the end of Eternals to announce that we're going to make a Blade movie? Not at all. And when is that going to pay off? 4 or 5 years from now?
But we could have said the same thing with Adam Warlock when, I'll name him man or yeah. So, but now that's being paid off. So again, is it going to be paid off correctly though? Is it going to be paid off correctly? Are they really going to connect that? Or are we just getting Adam Warlock because we've been saying it? No, it's like when they introduced Beta Ray Bill finally. Do you think it's going to actually connect? They failed on Beta Ray Bill. Like, I don't know how else to explain that. They failed on Beta Ray Bill.
I mean, he has been introduced.
Yeah, he's got a monolith or whatever it is on the side of the, So, but Adam Warlock, I Space Jesus, right? I do think that. I think he's got potential. I think he's going to be my theory here is I think he's going to be the new head of the Guardians of the Galaxy. We've already been told that the Guardians are breaking up, right? I think Rocket Raccoon's going to die. You're going to be stuck with a tree. Drax is gone. Drax is probably dead. Batista's already said he doesn't want any more, things to do with Marvel. So we're going to probably see a new team. And who's on that team? I think that team is going to be led by Adam Warlock. So in a sense, yes, I think that they're going to answer the bell. Is it going to be done in a quality manner that Adam Warlock should be? Debatable, but we'll see. I don't think so. I think that we're going to get a quality Adam Warlock. I don't think that it's going to be how he should be portrayed, if I'm being completely honest. But I do. So I want to try to transition this a little bit too into the next Avengers films. So in Phase 4, we had the 3 Spideys, which I thought was done very, very well. What I thought was terrible was Sony's marketing. Sony let the cat out of the bag way too early for that. And I think the more things that you do with Sony's going to want to leak it because that's what Sony does. But we're looking at multiverse characters that are all going to come in here. Jake, how's the multiverse going to be handled? I mean, we're already hearing rumors of multiple Ant-Men in Ant-Man Quantumania. We've got, is it the 816 world or whatever it was from Doctor Strange with, that we're all killed by Scarlet Witch. We're going to see multiple characters. You've been a massive proponent that you don't want to see all of these different variants, right? So how is this going to be handled in the upcoming movies? Well, I don't think I'm going to like it. I think the fans, I think majority of the fans will like it. And it's not just because I'm a pessimist and I'm a hater. It's the fact though that I have said this multiple times that we are reliant on variants now, and it is very lazy in the sense that you can answer everything now going, well, it's a variant universe. Oh, it's a variant. He's not real. And I said the biggest problem going into it is now we have 2 super excuses to rewrite history. We have the Skrulls really going to be involved, and we have variants. And so you pretty much have a cop-out right in of going, okay, well, that whole time that one was a Skrull. And okay, that one was a variant the whole time. Or okay, we can reintroduce this. And I feel it's a crutch that they wrote themselves in, that we never know how it's going to get out, but it's always going to be there too. And it's going to feel like, okay, you can use this whenever you want, like a get out of jail free card. And that's what I'm afraid of with this. Is that we're going to run into a problem where us fans get so pissed off and Kevin Feige's going to be like, all right, guys, we got to fix this. Make them all variants. Make them all Skrulls. Like, let's really backtrack this, because who has done that perfectly well and we've seen the downfall is DC. Mm-hmm. DC did that so well and fucked up everywhere that nobody knows who's what, why, where, when, and who's involved. And I feel that's the road Marvel's heading down, and it's bothering me. I think the variant storyline can be cool. I don't need it to be every little part of the story. I think we went away from let's introduce characters and have them go to a story arc to let's introduce a story arc and involve our characters into it. And I think that's been the biggest downfall for Marvel going forward. It's not about the characters joining together to become the Avengers. It's what are the Avengers going to be involved in and who's there? Mitch?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. And I think I've said that before, is where I think the MCU has become the monster now, in the sense that a lot of the source material that they should be pulling from is being written pulling from the MCU. So a lot of the newer comics, the newer Marvel content that's coming out is based on the MCU characters and their versions of it. So now the MCU is holding all of this weight. And to Jake's point, really the only thing they can do is say, all right, that was a scroll or that's a variant. But I also think that maybe after phase 6, we get into phase 7, and now the three of us, we've been on this ride now for a long time. They have to know at some point the MCU has to die, right? The main version of the MCU has to die and then start over. So maybe variants or pruned timelines or Kang or something in that sense. After you run out of enough of these storylines and you have to start over again, maybe you reset everything and that's how you start your recasting and doing new adventures and new things and that kind of stuff. It would be the same as if DC hit a flashpoint again and all of a sudden we're in a new universe with new actors. I think at some iteration, even in the books, whatever, you always have to kind of restart and tell the story new. It's been done for many, many, many years. New lines, the Spectacular Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man, all of these different versions of him with very similar backstories, but kind of what we've already seen in No Way Home, right? There's no Uncle Ben, but there was the line. The different Peters have, his Uncle Ben said it, Toby's Uncle Ben said it, Andrew lost his Gwen, which was his Mary Jane. Like, there's still very slight differences, and I think at some point they do have to take the whole weight of Marvel off of the MCU and try and redo it somehow. I think variants would work.
That brings up a few questions that I want to ask you guys then. Are there characters, like you were saying, Spider-Man, each one of them had their Gwen, their Aunt May, their Uncle Ben and stuff. Are there other characters that can translate the variant lines as easily as Spider-Man does in the MCU? Because I think it's the greatest character that you can do that with, because we have so many Spider-Man in the we always refer to the Spider-Verse rather than the Ant-Man verse and I know every character has them, but is there any other character in the Marvel universe now that would translate like that?
I don't really think so. And one of the reasons is because Spider-Man is so everybody. Head to toe covered, mask, everything. He's very much everybody could be him. I don't think you could translate an entire universe of Captain Americas. They're all going to be the same Boy Scout type thing. It'd be the same as if you just brought a bunch of Supermans together. They're all going to stand for truth, justice, and all that. I think Spider-Man, at a lot of different points and times with all of his clones and different versions and stuff, he struggles with all these moral dilemmas that us humans do too. So I think that's why he translates and relates so well in that. I don't really think you can do that with another set Marvel character.
B-word, you?
I agree with that. I think that the Spider-Verse is the Spider-Verse for that reason. I think that the Spider-Verse is actually probably a lot more interesting than a whole bunch of different multiverse characters within that. I do think that if you look at some of the multiverse comics, that there are some really good story arcs about other characters. I just don't think that there's a longevity to the story, if that makes sense. Whereas there's substance behind Spider-Gwen. There's substance between, Spider-Man 2099. You have these characters, Miles Morales, where everybody kind of has their own story arc. They have what makes sense to them. They have what the reader looks for in the character, but they also translate together within that Spider-Verse. So I don't know that can be done with another character.
See, that actually flows into the second question I was going to ask you guys. When we were saying eventually this has to die, one, B-word, you brought up earlier, when phase 3 was done, do you think we would have been ready if we just killed it off and just started over? I mean, are we ever going to be ready to kill this off?
I think when you're looking at properties like this, I think one of the biggest properties that you can look at in a similar sense is Batman. You had Batman 89, you had Batman Returns, you had Batman Forever, and then Batman and Robin. And technically all of those were the same character of Batman, even though they really weren't the same character of Batman. And when you look at that, you had to kill it mainly because it got so terrible in order to do Batman Begins, and then The Dark Knight, and then that trilogy. When it comes to Marvel, a couple things here. I think that Marvel's going to get just super crazy over the next 3 or 4 years when you're talking about this, the Kang War and the multiverse saga, because there's so many Kangs that there's going to open up all of these different worlds. I mean, we've been introduced to it in Loki and Doctor Strange, even the Spider-Man film, if you want to consider that, that's the same type of multiverse event where you're looking at, you're going to have the screen flooded with a number of characters that are all variants of each other, but are all of different universes. And at the end of the day, when you go back and you read Secret Wars, I forget what the Earth was called. Mitch, maybe you can help me out. Was it Battle Earth, Battleground, where all of these characters basically had to fight to the death, and then the character that won, or the character that made it through, that was the living character out of Secret Wars. What was that place called? Do you remember that?
I'm not sure. It was an undisclosed planet. I think there was a planet name, but you're talking about when the Beyonder took them all and they went into Secret Wars and all that? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, even in the comic books, it got so fantastic with the storyline that it was, and you see this with other things, the Infinity Saga and everything else, that it gets so big that you have to stop it. Like, you have to take the train off the track. And I feel like from the MCU perspective, where we're talking about a visual storytelling here, you're looking at the Kang multiverse war. I think that's going to introduce where all these different worlds are going to collide, and you have all these different, whatever it was called in Doctor Strange, where you have the worlds that are colliding, and you're going to have to address that in that war. And I think that Kang is going to win, just like Thanos won. I think that's already written in stone. And then you're going to have Secret Wars, and in Secret Wars, I think the characters that survive Secret Wars will, number one, be the new Avengers team moving forward. But number two, they will have the opportunity, whether it be like Captain America and we get, Chris, whatever his name is, back in the MCU, they will have other Captain Americas. They will have other Iron Men, not just RDJ. They will have all these different characters that are within this, that they're either going to die or they're going to live. And I think that the new MCU, the new world, is going to be built after that Secret Wars saga. And I think from there you can enter in, X-Men or Fantastic Four or whatever. But separately from that, there's certain story arcs that are great in the comics, right? So you have the relationship that Hulk and Wolverine have and the history. Mm-hmm. You also have the relationship of Magneto and Professor X. And it's going to be really hard in 2025 to tell a story that takes place in 2030 or 2033 or whatever, year that they're going to put it in, to talk about Professor X and Magneto going into these camps, right? And having their relationship built that way. So you have to figure out how to tie these guys together in a way that makes sense in that year that we're in, and the year that the story is being told. Does the timeline go back? I mean, are we going back to World War II and starting this shit over again? There's so many questions that are just mind-boggling to me that I think you have to kill this universe off. Mitch, what do you think?
Yeah, you're hitting it right on the head for me. You can't start Captain America over again and then bring him into a New Age Avengers, unless, of course, he was frozen in ice for 100 years this time, or however many more. But then that doesn't make sense with the technology we have and satellites in space. We didn't see him down there. There's a lot of those things. Yeah, how do you tell the story of Magneto in Jewish prison camps during World War II as a mutant, and then now it's 100 years later? He would be, even as a mutant, he'd probably be a little bit older than all that. So yeah, if you kill the MCU or whatever this iteration is, and then you start some of these things over, and maybe we don't need the X-Men to join the MCU. Maybe we need the X-Men to be its own standalone thing and its stories and all that stuff. But put the Disney and the Marvel resources into it. It's not a Fox property anymore, so we have more storytelling abilities, more CGI, more movie making power, right? And you can do more with that. But I think you're right. You're already setting up young Avengers. Remember, Wanda's kids are in play. Hulk's kid is in play. There's all these characters who become the young Avengers. There is a variant of Kang that is Iron Lad. So we're gonna see that. You're gonna see the main cast, the main MCU people go away. there's going to be an introduction to Miles Morales where Tom Holland's going to be older and he's going to have to teach him. All those things are fine, but eventually stop, reset the MCU, and let's see what it looks like from a new perspective.
Let me ask you this, and this might be kind of hard to do, but if Marvel were to introduce the characters in Secret Wars, right? So you have your X-Men characters, you have your Fantastic Four characters, which I don't know that those two will be introduced by then, but let's just assume that they will. But they're coming to us from another planet. We're learning about planetary timelines right now, where, for instance, if you look at the female version of Loki, I forget her name, she's currently back in the 1970s in London, right? She's time traveling. We've already introduced time travel. If you're bringing in an X-Men team from the 50s, let's say, or from the 60s, let's say, or even the 70s for that matter, and you're introducing them into this world today, and they're the team that's taking over from here forward come Secret Wars, where you can still tell some of those stories. You can still have Auschwitz. You can still have the prison camps. You can still have the history maybe with the Hulk. Maybe there's a new Hulk in that, right? Would that disappoint you? Do you want it to just be killed off and started fresh? Or do you think it's time to maybe take some of these properties that they've worked so hard to world build and start to isolate them like Batman and DC right now? Like, where do you want to go with this, Jake?
See, actually, I think a cool thing that could happen is, for example, she goes back to, let's say, World War II, and you let that, that character stand there, and it's its own universe, its own world, and then you have the X-Men go from there. And they never need to come into this future of where we're at. I mean, you can do winks and nods. I mean, that's one thing I think we enjoyed about Deadpool when it was a Fox property. There was just a lot of winks and nods to X-Men with having X-Men, but not, you know what I mean? I think that would be a cool way to do it, to kill off, but like rebirth, if that makes sense, of let's just have this character go back to, the 1800s, and they meet some mutants or whatever. And that whole series that branches off into its own, like, almost like, world, and they world build there, and then you could world build over here. That's what was comfortable about the TV series. They were connected but not, and now everything's so connected. It's like, we have to have a cameo, guys. We have to have this, and that's where I think it could be cool, and you could sort of kill things off easier rather than just saying, okay, we're done, it's been fun, let's recast everybody and start over. I mean, because as we started this show with DC, the one thing DC has going for it, we've dealt with how many Batmans over the years? We can deal with another one. Can I deal with another Iron Man right now? No, I can't. I've had an Iron Man. I know who my Iron Man is. I can't just have that recasted now, and it doesn't feel the same. The properties, that's why they're not the same.
But we have accepted the new Spider-Man. But I guess, Mitch, so to put this in layman's terms for people who might not be as big comic books fans as ours that are listening, Jake wants more of the Flintstones meet the Jetsons type of worlds, right? Mm-hmm. Where they all have their own different timelines. What's the timeline that you're looking for here? What's the next step? If you're in charge of the creatives here, what's the next step of these worlds? Like, how do you do this?
Well, let me back you up a minute. Is Jake aware that the Flintstones and the Jetsons live on the same Earth on the same timeline?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Yeah, that's a theory that'll blow your mind, right?
Right. Class systems.
I agree with what Jake's saying. I think with the TVA, they could do this real easily. You have all these timelines branching off, and they keep going out and pruning them, right? What if you had it all? Take all of your earlier ones, your Fox property X-Men's and your Sony property Spider-Man. Sure, we've already established that we're not pruning those timelines. Like, they exist outside of the MCU, right? The Spider-Verse works great because if you, in the first Spider-Verse movie, all of these other Spider-Mans got brought into that universe, they did their thing, and they went back to their own houses, right? You can do that with these Marvel properties. Somehow get that going. The X-Men exist along their own timeline and their own version of it. The Netflix shows exist on their own version. And then when some sort of Avengers level threat pops up and we need to bring some guys in from another thing, a secret war, then we can do that. But aside from that, let's have a MCU version of the X-Men running on their own thing. Because I also don't like how these stories don't make sense in some instances, right? There's a whole Celestial popping out of the ocean still from the Eternals, and no one has addressed that at all. Yep. We just made to kind of like forget that's going on.
Well, and don't forget you had the Celestial looking over the Earth while people are just sitting there looking up at it, and nobody said a word. Or you go into Moon Knight, and all of a sudden the stars are just moving.
Yeah, just whipping around up there. We're all just taking videos on our cell phones, and there's no explanation. But that, again, is the problem with the MCU, because somewhere in the storyboarding room, they're like, we're going to pay that off. We're going to tell them what happens with that. But it's going to be 5 or 6 shows and a movie later. That's 2 years from now that they're going to have to remember that happened. So I think if you tell these stories along their own lines, and maybe some of them cross a little bit more than others, but really give them their own runs, and then if they need to cross over, then they can. That's kind of, I really don't know how you reset the entire MCU, but other than to start slowly killing pieces of it and then letting it kind of do its own thing.
Well, boys, I don't think that we've solved anything tonight, but I think that we've vented and put a good button up on the state of the MCU. Last question to you both. Which character that has not been introduced yet, not meaning that it was a Fox character and you can bring it in, which character that has not been introduced yet into the Marvel Cinematic Universe do you want to see? Jake, I'll start with you.
Silver Surfer.
Silver Surfer was a Fox property. Let's get something that hasn't been seen before.
Oh, fuck. He has been seen before. I just wanted to forget about it. Damn it. Okay, if can I do a character that has like it's Venom Pool.
Perfect. I'll go with
whether
Venom
it's in
Pool.
What If or whatever. Yeah. I love Venom Pool. I think it's one of the coolest little fucking stories. It's hilarious. Venom's my favorite. Deadpool's fun. I would love to see Venom Pool.
Mitch, who you got?
Squirrel Girl.
Oh, fuck yes. Oh my god, dude! Yes. Can you imagine the butt plugs that are going to come out? Oh, so hot.
That's actually pretty hot. I'm not even going to lie. That's amazing. I think I'm going to go with Sentry. I think I'd really like to see Sentry here. I realize that that's a Superman in the MCU, but that's who I'm going to go with. So with that, Mitch, you've started a podcast recently. I know that if people are following our socials, they've seen us share stuff from your podcast called Two Guys in a Dart. Could you go ahead and tell our audience kind of what to expect with that, when your episode potentially might release, what the context of it is, etc.?
It's really just me and my longtime friend Bobby getting in and talking about life, man. We've had some crazy experiences in the work that we do, and then just in life in general, man. He's one of these dudes that has experienced so much crazy nonsense up and down, and the stories that he tells are really unbelievable. And then, I've had a lot of experiences too with different things, ranging from work and life and diabetes and all that other kind of stuff. So hopefully we'll just tell some stories and have some fun with it. And we've got some guests lined up that are going to come in and talk about some different fun things. And hopefully it's something that you guys can have a good time listening to.
And this should be first episode should be coming out in January. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you again for coming on, Mitch. You know that, by default, you are a Bleach Bro, but, we always appreciate you coming on and nerding out with us. With that, I do want to shout out our Patreon subscribers. Thank you so much for, again, continuing to listen to our other topics on there. We will have some more content going forward after the first of the year. With that, Jake, what do you got for us?
Thanks for all the dirty talk. Come back and get sanitized.